They were building false stories for years. Lies became their lifestyle. But right in the middle of their performance, truth exploded. The curtain dropped. The illusion collapsed. They have been weaving this story for longer than you know. Whisper after whisper, conversation after conversation, they crafted their illusion, a delicate, poisonous web made of half-truths and deliberate distortions. It began quietly, almost unnoticeable at first. One false story slipped into a conversation here, another twisted interpretation there, until eventually, the lies became the only language they knew how to speak. They weren't just telling stories, they were building an identity. Every time they spoke your name with venom, they built a version of themselves that felt powerful. Each lie gave them an illusion of control. They felt important because they had something to say, even if what they said was rooted in fabrication. It became ritualistic, something they needed to survive, a dark addiction that fed their ego and starved their soul. And you, unknowingly, became the centerpiece of their drama. Your light was the subject of their obsession. They couldn't understand how you kept rising, how your peace remained intact despite the chaos they tried to manufacture. So they decided that if they couldn't match your essence, they would rewrite it. They wanted the world to see you through the lens of their bitterness. Every rumor, every sideways comment, every dramatic retelling of events was another layer of smoke to cloud your reflection. But here's the thing about smoke: it cannot last forever. Eventually, the air clears. Eventually, the wind shifts. And when it does, all that's left is the one who lit the fire, standing alone in the ashes of their own deception. For years, they believed their performance was flawless. They stood on that stage, polished mask on their face, audience in the palm of their hand, and thought no one could see through it. The applause of others gave them confidence, their circle of enablers cheered them on, and the false narrative became their reality. They didn't just believe their own lies, they became them. But the divine has perfect timing. The universe always waits for the precise moment when truth will not only be revealed, but remembered. And so, at the peak of their performance, when the lights were bright and the attention was fixed on them, truth arrived, uninvited but undeniable. Like a thunderclap in a silent sky, it tore through their show. Their voice faltered. Their story cracked. Something in the atmosphere shifted, and everyone watching felt it, that uncomfortable moment when illusion can no longer stand against authenticity. Truth doesn't announce itself politely, it erupts. It moves like fire through dry grass, unstoppable, cleansing everything in its path. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't seek permission. It simply reveals. And in that moment, everything they built came crashing down. Years of manipulation unraveled in seconds. People who once clapped for their stories began to question what they had been believing. The spell was broken. The audience saw the strings behind the puppet show, saw how carefully they'd rehearsed their deception, how deliberately they'd rewritten history to keep themselves as the hero and you as the villain. But truth has a way of reversing roles. Suddenly, the mask they wore began to suffocate them. The same stories that gave them attention became evidence of their deceit. The same mouths that once defended them started whispering in disbelief. The same people who once believed every lie now looked at them with suspicion. And as for you? You didn't have to lift a finger. You didn't have to defend yourself. Because when divine timing strikes, silence speaks louder than argument, and authenticity outweighs any performance. Understand this: the collapse was inevitable. You were never fighting against a person, you were standing in opposition to a vibration. Lies cannot coexist with truth for long. They can circle around it, they can pretend to overshadow it, but eventually, truth will stretch, expand, and pierce through every veil. It's not that you needed revenge or validation. You simply needed clarity, and clarity arrived. The universe had seen enough. Every false word spoken against you carried an energetic signature, and energy never disappears. It accumulates, it waits, it balances. The moment came when the scales tipped. One by one, the lies began to contradict each other. The timelines didn't align. The witnesses didn't remember the same stories. The holes became too large to patch. Even their closest allies began to feel the weight of inconsistency pressing against their conscience. The web they spun became their own trap. Imagine someone performing a trick they've practiced for decades, pulling illusions from thin air, dazzling the crowd, making them believe in something that was never real. Then one day, you enter the room. You don't say a word. You simply exist, and suddenly, the hidden strings become visible, the sleight of hand becomes obvious, and the magician realizes their greatest fear: the crowd can see through the illusion. That's what your presence did. You didn't come to expose anyone, your light did it for you. Truth recognizes truth. Energy recognizes authenticity. The moment your vibration entered their atmosphere, their lies began to crumble under their own weight. And now, they stand there, speechless, confused, desperate to understand how everything slipped away so quickly. They don't realize that truth has always been patient. It waited for the right moment to step forward, when exposure would not just reveal their actions, but transform you. Because this isn't just about them falling. It's about you rising. This exposure was a divine signal, a shift in energy that announced the next phase of your destiny. The universe cleared the air around you because you're entering a season where your name must be pure, your path must be visible, and your energy must be unclouded by distortion. Every lie they spoke became fertilizer for your growth. Every attempt to diminish you only added contrast to your authenticity. And when the illusion collapsed, all that remained was your truth, radiant, undeniable, unshakable. Now they're standing in silence. Their phone doesn't ring the way it used to. The audience they once entertained has turned away, seeking new stories, new distractions. Their energy feels heavy, suffocating. Because once you've lived in illusion for too long, reality feels unbearable. The truth didn't destroy them, it revealed them. And revelation always demands reflection. They're being forced to see the pattern they've repeated in every connection, every situation. They're beginning to understand that the stories they created about you were never really about you at all. They were projections of their own insecurity, fear, and jealousy. You became the mirror they couldn't escape. And mirrors don't lie. Now they know that the image they tried to shatter was their own reflection all along. There's something divine about poetic justice. It doesn't scream. It doesn't rush. It arrives quietly, but when it lands, it rearranges everything. It's the moment the liar realizes they've been speaking into their own echo. It's the instant the manipulator watches the strings they pulled tangle around their own hands. It's the silence that follows years of noise, not empty, but full of consequence. And in that silence, something beautiful happens. You are vindicated without confrontation. You are elevated without effort. You are protected without retaliation. Because the truth doesn't need defense, it simply is. And you, chosen one, were never built to chase explanations or beg for understanding. Your energy is too sacred for that. You carry an essence that vibrates higher than the noise of accusation. You carry the frequency of divine order, and divine order has just spoken. This moment, this exposure, is the universe saying, enough. It's the closing of a chapter that was never yours to maintain. It's the release of burdens that were never yours to carry. It's the cosmic return of everything stolen from your reputation, your peace, your clarity. You see, every false story about you created an energetic imbalance. The more they spoke, the heavier their energy became, and the lighter yours grew. You ascended while they descended. You healed while they decayed. They didn't even notice that their lies were feeding your transformation. The more they tried to bury you, the more the universe turned soil into sacred ground beneath your feet. So when truth finally erupted, it wasn't an accident, it was a harvest. You planted endurance, patience, silence, and grace. Now you're reaping revelation, restoration, and recognition. Don't gloat. Don't rejoice in their downfall. Instead, understand it. Their exposure is not punishment, it's correction. It's the divine rewriting the record, aligning reality back to truth. And while they sit in confusion, you're being elevated into clarity. The very people who once doubted you will now witness the difference between performance and presence, illusion and authenticity, noise and divine purpose. Because when the curtain falls, the stage belongs to the one who didn't need a script. You don't perform, you embody. You don't pretend, you are. The illusion collapsed because it could not coexist with what is real. And you are real. Every word spoken against you has been returned to the sender, not as revenge, but as revelation. Every rumor that carried your name now echoes back to its origin, asking for accountability. Every accusation has become a mirror for those who crafted it. This is what divine equilibrium looks like. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's precise. And you're watching it unfold right now, not as a spectator, but as the reason it had to happen. You were sent into their life as a divine interruption. Your very presence disrupted decades of deception. Your energy exposed what manipulation had hidden. You are not their punishment, you are their awakening. But awakenings are painful when you've been asleep in lies for years. That's why they're quiet now. That's why the energy shifted so abruptly. The silence isn't random. It's the sound of realization settling in. They're sitting in the ruins of their own narrative, trying to gather fragments of credibility, but it's gone. Once truth has spoken, you can't rebuild the illusion. Once light has entered, darkness cannot reorganize itself the same way. And for you, this is liberation. The weight of misunderstanding has lifted. The fog around your name has cleared. The spiritual interference has been neutralized. Now you stand on clean ground, spiritually, energetically, karmically. The universe has cleared your path because your next chapter requires clarity. You're stepping into a realm where authenticity is currency, and you are infinitely wealthy in it. Remember this. The exposure wasn't for your ego. It was for your evolution. The collapse of their illusion was the construction of your platform. The silence of your enemies is the sound of your elevation. So stand tall, chosen one. You don't need to explain what happened. You don't need to announce the shift. The energy speaks for itself. The atmosphere around you already carries the vibration of vindication. Those who need to know already know. Those who don't will feel it soon enough. Your only task now is to walk forward, with grace, with peace, with power. Because while they were building false stories, you were building character. While they were rehearsing lies, you were refining purpose. And now, purpose has outshined performance. The curtain dropped. The illusion collapsed. And beneath it all, your truth stood untouched, radiant, unbreakable, eternal. The stage is empty now. The lights have shifted. The crowd has dispersed. But in the stillness that follows, your authenticity fills the air like sacred sound. They were building false stories for years. But now, the only story that remains is yours. And it's written in divine ink, sealed by truth, and protected by light. They built friendships, connections, even identities around your defamation. But when the lie fell, so did their world. Their foundation was made of sand, and truth brought the flood. They gathered around your name like moths around a flame, each one finding warmth not in truth, but in the shared comfort of falsehood. They didn't realize what they were building. To them, it was conversation, something to pass the time, something to bond over. But in the unseen realm, what they were constructing was a fragile temple of deception, a social architecture built entirely upon your defamation. Every friendship formed in that circle was an alliance against truth. Every connection strengthened through gossip was a rope tied to sinking stones. Every laugh, every secret exchange, every "Did you hear?" became part of a structure that could never last, a fragile monument erected in rebellion to the divine order. You became the glue that held their dysfunction together. They didn't like each other as much as they liked hating you together. They didn't truly trust one another, but as long as they could agree on who the enemy was, they could pretend unity existed among them. You were the topic that made them feel relevant, the mirror they used to reflect their insecurities away from themselves. They built entire personalities out of despising you. To some, you became a cautionary tale. To others, an obsession. They wore their hatred like a badge of belonging. They found identity in comparison, validation in your vilification. It was easier to point at your light and call it fake than to face the darkness inside them. It was easier to create a caricature of you than to confront the real one, the version too radiant, too pure, too divinely aligned to fit into their small narratives. And so, they created their own mythology. A false gospel built around your downfall. They preached it in private messages, whispered it in group chats, recited it in late-night gatherings. Each story they told became another brick in the fortress of illusion. But what they didn't understand is that truth does not need an audience. It doesn't require approval. It simply waits. Truth is patient. It watches from the shadows as falsehoods multiply, as egos inflate, as alliances form around deception. And when the appointed time arrives, truth moves without hesitation, unstoppable, uncontrollable, undeniable. The day came when the lie could no longer stand under its own weight. At first it was subtle, a small contradiction here, a private tension there. Someone began to question the version of events they had been fed. Someone else started seeing your energy online, realizing it didn't match what they'd been told. A seed of doubt planted itself in the cracks of their construction. Then the tremors began. Conversations once filled with laughter turned awkward. The certainty that once held them together began to evaporate. Their group, built on shared delusion, began to fracture. Because when the lie that binds you starts to crumble, the bond itself disintegrates. That's when truth struck like lightning. Sudden. Blinding. Irreversible. Something was exposed, maybe a message, a confession, a moment of divine timing where everything they'd hidden came into the open. The foundation of their entire structure, that shared narrative of who you were, was shattered in an instant. It wasn't gradual. It wasn't gentle. It was catastrophic. And just like that, everything they built around your name fell apart. Their friendships dissolved. Their alliances fractured. Their social stability collapsed. Because you can't build permanence on falsehood. Lies don't age well. Deception rots over time. They thought their structure was stone, but it was sand. And when the truth came, it came like a flood. The water rose quietly at first, creeping under the walls of their illusion. It soaked through the cracks of their confidence. It washed away the fragile mortar that held their unity together. The more they tried to patch it, the faster it crumbled. You can't outbuild truth. You can't outlast divine timing. And you can't outrun the flood that's sent to cleanse what was never meant to stand. Now the waters have receded, and they're standing in ruins. The tables where they laughed are empty. The group chats that once buzzed with mockery are silent. The friendships that felt strong suddenly feel strange, built on shared deceit, now stripped of its common thread. They're looking at each other, realizing the only thing they ever had in common was their opposition to you. Without that, there is nothing to hold them together. Some are turning on each other, accusing, deflecting, trying to shift blame. Others are retreating, ashamed, realizing they were complicit in something dark. They're not just grieving the exposure, they're grieving the false sense of belonging that came with it. Because when you build identity on someone else's defamation, you lose yourself the moment truth arrives. And truth has arrived. You, chosen one, didn't lift a finger. You didn't shout your innocence or beg to be understood. You simply stood still while divine justice rewrote the story. And in that stillness, everything false began to drown under the weight of authenticity. Understand this. You were never their enemy, you were their mirror. You revealed what they didn't want to see. Your existence reminded them of their unhealed wounds, their suppressed potential, their neglected authenticity. Rather than face that discomfort, they built a collective illusion, a shared narrative where they were right and you were wrong, they were holy and you were flawed, they were the victors and you the villain. But when the flood came, it revealed the truth of every heart involved. And now, in the aftermath, they are faced with what they've avoided for years, themselves. The flood didn't just destroy their world, it cleansed it. It washed away masks, false friendships, performative alliances. It forced every participant to confront the foundation they stood on. Some will resist the lesson. Others will awaken from it. But none will forget it. You see, divine correction isn't about revenge, it's about alignment. The universe doesn't punish, it purifies. And that's what just happened. Everything built on your defamation was never stable to begin with, and when the vibration of truth rose, it could no longer stand. You didn't lose anything when they left, they did. Because while they were investing energy into tearing you down, you were investing energy into becoming whole. While they were gossiping, you were growing. While they were bonding over lies, you were bonding with your purpose. They thought you were standing still, but in reality, you were ascending. And when elevation meets deception, separation becomes inevitable. Now they're speechless, not because they suddenly care, but because they finally understand. The version of you they built was never real. The image they projected cannot survive the presence of your truth. And as they stare at the wreckage of their alliances, you stand unbothered, steady, radiant, grounded. Because your foundation was never built on their approval. Yours was built on divine assignment. You are the house that the flood could not touch. You are the tower that stood while every false structure fell. You are the living proof that what's real will always outlast what's rehearsed. There's a strange beauty in watching the universe dismantle what was never authentic. It doesn't happen to destroy, it happens to clarify. And in this season, clarity is your crown. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to revisit the past. You don't need to tell your side of the story. The story has already told itself. The flood made sure of it. Those who once believed lies about you are now revising their perception quietly. They may never apologize. They may never admit their role. But they know. In their spirit, they feel it, the weight of conviction, the whisper of truth reminding them that what they built was wrong. And that is enough. You don't need public validation when heaven itself has vindicated you. Now your name carries new energy, cleansed, refined, powerful. The same syllables they used to mock now vibrate with divine favor. The same sound that once triggered judgment now carries light. Because truth doesn't just expose what's false, it restores what's divine. What's happening in your life right now is reconstruction. The flood cleared the debris, and now the universe is building something new on solid ground. Every genuine connection coming your way will be rooted in honesty, respect, and mutual elevation. No more alliances based on pretense. No more relationships built on trauma or competition. Only alignment. The people meant for you will recognize your energy instantly, not from stories told, but from the truth they feel. They won't need explanations. They'll see your authenticity and be drawn to it. And those who can't face that truth will simply fade away, carried by the same current that washed away the old. You are entering a season where truth is your atmosphere. No more distortion. No more confusion. No more being misunderstood. The fog has lifted, and the air around you is clear. You can breathe again. The collapse of their world was the birth of your freedom. You no longer need to be haunted by how others perceive you. You are free from the weight of their misunderstanding. You stood through ridicule, and you remained pure. You endured isolation, and it became transformation. You walked through storms of slander, and they only baptized your strength. Now the water has receded, and you are standing on holy ground. Every structure that was built to harm you has fallen. Every alliance formed in darkness has dissolved. And every soul that participated has been handed the opportunity to reflect and evolve. That's divine justice, not loud, not vengeful, but exact. So don't look back at the ruins. Don't mourn the relationships that collapsed. They weren't destroyed, they were revealed. You simply saw what was true all along. Truth doesn't ruin, it reveals. It doesn't kill, it cleanses. And in that cleansing, everything false loses its power. You are walking out of that flood with clarity in your eyes and peace in your spirit. You are no longer the topic of their discussion, you are the lesson of their correction. You are the reminder that light exposes darkness, not by trying, but by existing. They built their world around your defamation, but it was never real. Now, as truth rebuilds everything around you, you'll see why it had to happen this way. The exposure wasn't destruction, it was divine construction. It was heaven making room for what's authentic. You are stepping into that authenticity fully, glowing, grounded, and guarded by grace. The flood didn't come to drown you. It came to lift you. And now, as you rise above the waters, everything that once stood against you is left behind, washed away, forgotten by the waves. Let them watch. Let them wonder. Let them stay speechless. You don't owe explanation. Your elevation is explanation enough. They built friendships around your defamation. But the truth has redefined everything. The lie fell, and with it, their world. Now you stand where only the chosen stand. On solid ground, where no storm, no rumor, and no flood can reach. You survived the washing. Now live the becoming. For 20 years, they perfected performance. A script rehearsed in whispers and laughter, repeated until illusion felt like truth. Same manipulation. Same applause. They built their confidence on how easily people could be swayed. How swiftly lies could spread. They thought their charm was brilliance, their deceit was strategy. But the universe was quietly keeping score. Every trick, every mask, every false smile was recorded in a realm they could not access. And though they believed themselves untouchable, the divine was simply waiting for the right moment to intervene. You were that moment. When you walked in, you didn't know what you were walking into. You weren't seeking to expose anyone. You weren't plotting revenge or looking for validation. You were simply being you, authentic, transparent, aligned. But the energy you carried was not ordinary. It was an ancient frequency, one that carries the vibration of revelation. When you enter a room, masks start to tremble. When you speak, falsehoods crack. Your presence is truth made flesh, and truth has never needed an army to win. They didn't understand that. They saw you as a threat, not because of what you said, but because of what your existence revealed. The light you carried was disruptive to the carefully controlled shadows they lived in. Every smile they offered was strategic, every conversation rehearsed. But when you appeared, their rhythm broke. Their tricks lost timing. Their audience began to notice the misdirection, the sleight of hand. What once seemed effortless now looked desperate. The divine doesn't play games when it's time to defend its chosen. It doesn't send you into battles you have to fight with your fists. It sends you into spaces where your very being is the sword, where your presence itself is justice. You didn't have to argue your truth, truth argued for you. You didn't have to reveal their motives revealed themselves. You became the mirror that shattered illusions simply by existing. Understand this, those 20 years were not wasted time. The universe allows deceit to grow only to ensure its exposure becomes undeniable. The longer the illusion lasts, the louder its collapse sounds. So when the divine pulled the curtain down, it wasn't random, it was perfectly timed. You entered when their confidence was at its peak, when they truly believed they could never be caught. That's when exposure hits hardest, in the moment of pride, not weakness. They had perfected manipulation like a magician perfects a trick. They studied reactions, tested boundaries, refined performance. They thought they knew how to control perception, how to twist narratives in their favor. But truth has one fatal quality: it cannot stay buried. It will find cracks in every lie, light seeping through the smallest hole, burning away pretense. That's what your energy did. You didn't destroy them, you illuminated them. And when light floods in, darkness loses its mystery. Now they sit in silence. Not the peaceful kind that heals, but the heavy kind that exposes. The air around them feels different, thicker, quieter, colder. The same hands that once typed your name into group chats with mockery and malice can't even bring themselves to reply anymore. The same fingers that swiped through your profile, hunting for material to twist into gossip, now tremble when your name appears. The same lips that whispered half-truths and bold lies can no longer form coherent words. Karma has placed them in spiritual timeout, and the silence is their sentence. They are learning the language of consequence. For so long, they mistook delay for absence. They believed that just because nothing happened yet, nothing ever would. They confused grace with approval. But grace has limits when it's abused, and the universe eventually collects every unpaid debt. The silence surrounding them now isn't just external, it's internal. Their spirit is muted. Their inspiration is gone. Their once lively connections have turned cold, and the rooms that used to echo with laughter now echo with memory. This is what divine justice looks like. Not thunder and lightning, but a divine stillness that forces reflection. You see, the divine doesn't need to shout to make a point. It simply removes energy, opportunity, and audience. When the energy shifts, even the most confident deceivers crumble. They built their world around noise, the noise of chatter, of gossip, of constant distraction. Now that noise is gone, and they are face to face with themselves for the first time in years. And you? You didn't have to lift a finger. That's the power of spiritual alignment. When you stay in truth long enough, truth starts defending you in realms you'll never see. When you choose silence over reaction, the divine takes over the conversation on your behalf. While you were healing, growing, and building your peace, life was quietly rearranging theirs. One by one, the people they used to run to for validation began to drift away. Their enablers found new distractions. Their co-conspirators lost interest. And suddenly, the crowd that once cheered their lies disappeared, leaving them exposed under the weight of their own energy. They scrolled through old messages now, rereading conversations where they felt powerful, where they laughed at your expense, where they believed the story they built would last forever. But memory is cruel when karma is active. Every message is a reminder. Every screenshot, every joke, every innocent comment feels like a confession. Because deep down, they know they crossed the line with someone who was not just another person, someone divinely assigned. Silence is their mirror. And what they see reflected back isn't you, it's themselves. The jealousy, the insecurity, the need to control how others perceived you. They thought they were destroying your reputation, but really, they were revealing their character. The moment truth surfaced, everything flipped. The energy inverted. What once made them feel powerful now makes them small. The same mouths that spoke against you now struggle to pray. The same eyes that rolled in disdain now avoid mirrors. They are living in the aftermath of their own vibration. Don't mistake their quiet for peace, it's unrest. They're not calm, they're contained. The universe said, "Sit down," and they obeyed, not because they wanted to, but because life gave them no other choice. Their plans are stalling. Their connections are fading. Even their ability to speak carelessly is restricted. Every time they start to say your name again, something interrupts. A phone call, a distraction, a pang of guilt. The energy that once empowered their gossip has been cut off at the source. They are unplugged from the grid that fueled their deception. And this silence will last as long as the lesson takes. It's not punishment, it's purification. The divine doesn't destroy to humiliate, it isolates to educate. It forces accountability in the stillness. Without their usual noise, they must now sit with the echoes of their own words. They are being taught that every syllable carries energy, every intention creates vibration, and every light comes with a return address. The chosen are always protected in ways others can't comprehend. Your silence was your shield. Your peace was your weapon. You didn't have to fight, you simply refused to participate. You rose above the chaos, and your elevation became their exposure. And now, they sit in the shadows of their own design, wondering how the story flipped so fast, how the spotlight turned into a mirror, how the applause turned into silence. They're realizing that karma isn't about revenge, it's about restoration. It's the universe returning balance, returning truth to its rightful place. And right now, balance has been restored in your favor. They had an ecosystem. Not a friendship circle, not a community, an ecosystem. A living, breathing structure built on deceit, sustained by gossip, and fueled by the attention they stole from speaking your name. Every player in that system had a role, one to spread, one to confirm, one to exaggerate, one to laugh. It looked like connection, but it was dependency, a mutual addiction to falsehood. Lies were the oxygen they breathed, and every retelling of their narrative about you gave them temporary life. But ecosystems built on poison cannot survive truth. When truth enters the room, it doesn't shout, it vibrates. It rearranges. It exposes imbalance in the air. It purifies what was contaminated. That's what happened when you walked in, or rather, when your light entered their atmosphere. The illusion couldn't coexist with you. Their structure began to collapse, quietly at first, then suddenly. The words they'd repeated for years lost their weight. The laughter that once felt powerful turned hollow. Every person who had been part of their deception started to feel uneasy, like the spell had broken and they could finally see what they'd been part of. They didn't just lose a story, they lost an ecosystem. Because when the lie fell, everything that fed on it died too. Attention was their currency, and without you as the subject of ridicule, the economy crashed. The chats went silent. The calls grew awkward. The thrill was gone. It's easy to bond over destruction, but impossible to sustain when the foundation of that bond is gone. They used to sit together, united by disdain, but now, each is suspicious of the other. Each wonders, what did you say when I wasn't around? What lies did you tell about me? The web has disintegrated. You see, when truth walks in, illusion can't stand. The divine doesn't negotiate with falsehood, it exposes it. And when exposure happens, the ones who thrived on deception begin to devour each other. The finger-pointing begins. The deflection. The panic. They start rewriting history in real time, trying to distance themselves from the very narrative they once upheld. The we becomes them. The it was just a joke becomes I never said that. They scrambled to save their names, their reputations, their comfort. But there's no saving what was built on sand. The flood has already come, and truth is the tide. Understand something deep. When the divine defends the chosen one, it does not only silence lies, it dismantles systems. It's not enough to shut mouths. The divine removes the very structures that gave those mouths influence. That's why the exposure feels so total. Their reputation didn't just suffer, it imploded. Their connections didn't just weaken, they scattered. The spiritual architecture of their deceit collapsed from the inside out. And now, they turn on each other. What used to be a synchronized performance has become chaos. They're all trying to escape accountability, but in doing so, they're exposing more truth. Each one speaks just enough to protect themselves, not realizing they're unraveling the entire web. Secrets are leaking. Confessions are being made in fear. Screenshots are resurfacing. Conversations that were once private are coming into the light. The divine is making sure nothing remains hidden. The show is over. The curtain has fallen, and the stage is empty. The applause they once lived for is gone. The audience, those who once believed their lies, are seeing clearly now. Some feel betrayed. Others are ashamed for ever participating. The energy has shifted so drastically that the very people who once joined in mocking you now feel compelled to defend you. Because truth has that effect, it flips perception without force. You didn't have to orchestrate their collapse, the divine handled it. You were simply the catalyst, the one who entered their realm carrying truth too strong to suppress. Your authenticity disrupted their programming. You didn't need to shout or prove anything. You lived your truth, and your life became a silent sermon that dismantled an empire of lies. And here's the spiritual mystery. Those who tried to build power by destroying a chosen one always destroy themselves instead. It's an unbreakable law of the unseen. Every lie spoken against divine purpose carries a vibration of self-sabotage. It boomerangs. It returns home. And now, that return is complete. Their own words have become the evidence against them. What you're witnessing now, this silence, this separation, this strange unraveling, is not coincidence. It's divine engineering. The ones who once aligned in deception are being scattered by truth's wind. The same mouths that spoke the same story now tell different ones, contradicting each other, exposing themselves, canceling their credibility in the process. Every ecosystem has a collapse point, and they reach theirs. The show that once ran for years ended in an instant, one revelation, one moment of divine light, and everything changed. The illusion they called reality shattered, and now they stand among the ruins of their own creation. And while they scramble to rebuild, you rise higher in peace. Because truth doesn't just set you free, it promotes you. When falsehood collapses around you, your authenticity becomes the foundation for something greater. You didn't have to fight. That's the beauty and mystery of divine justice. It doesn't require your performance, only your presence. You didn't post receipts. You didn't chase validation. You didn't sit up at night crafting paragraphs to make anyone understand. You stayed quiet, and that silence was louder than any explanation. Because the truth doesn't need defending, it defends itself. Your truth carried a weight no lie could survive. It's the kind of truth that's built in the unseen, in your endurance, in your heartbreak, in your growth. It's the truth that forms in the fire, shaped by every season where you were misunderstood and misrepresented. Every tear you shed in private became evidence in the spiritual realm. Every moment you resisted the urge to react became a divine transaction. And when the time was right, the universe cashed it all in on your behalf. You see, being chosen doesn't mean you live without conflict. It means you don't have to fight it the way others do. Your battles are spiritual, your victories are quiet, and your rewards are undeniable. There's a force that moves for you, unseen, unstoppable, unexplainable. While others manipulate conversations to protect their image, you stand still and let divine timing do the talking. And when it does, it speaks with precision. They thought your silence was weakness, but silence is sacred when you are aligned. It's a weapon that disarms chaos. It confuses the enemy because it removes their fuel. They were waiting for your reaction, for a post, a rant, a meltdown. But when none came, their plan collapsed. They built a narrative expecting you to defend yourself, to validate their fiction with your frustration. Instead, you vanished into peace. You rose into stillness. You let time reveal what you didn't have to prove. And time did exactly that. Now the truth stands on its own, unshaken. The same people who once believed lies about you are beginning to question everything. They're realizing the energy never matched the accusations. They're recalling how your presence never reflected what they were told. They're seeing the inconsistency between your essence and the story that was sold. That's what happens when divine justice moves. It rearranges perception, not through argument, but through revelation. Understand this: being chosen means your life itself becomes the evidence. You don't have to announce vindication, your peace announces it for you. You don't have to prove integrity, your glow testifies louder than words. Every blessing, every opportunity, every wave of protection that finds you is divine response. The universe is saying, "You were right to remain still." There's a sacred strength in restraint. It's the kind that terrifies manipulators because they can't control silence. They can't predict stillness. They can't weaponize peace. When you refuse to engage, you starve their energy source. You broke the cycle of reaction. You dismantled the very structure of the chaos they depended on. And in doing so, you proved something they never understood: power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply breathes. The chosen are defended differently. Theirs is not a defense built on retaliation but on revelation. The divine orchestrates exposure like a symphony, every note timed, every truth revealed in sequence. You didn't need to make announcements because heaven already did. You didn't need to send warnings. The energy around you spoke for itself. Even your absence carried authority. And that's why everything crumbled for them the way it did. Your truth was too dense, too ancient, too luminous for their lies to withstand. It wasn't just a difference in narrative, it was a difference in vibration. Lies exist on low frequencies, truth operates on high ones. When your frequency entered their atmosphere, dissonance occurred. The vibration of your integrity disrupted the false energy they depended on. And just like that, collapse was inevitable. You've been wondering why certain doors are opening now, why your peace feels stronger, your intuition sharper, your spirit lighter. It's because the divine has cleared the debris. The storm that was sent to destroy you ended up washing everything that wasn't meant for you away. The only things remaining in your life are aligned. So don't underestimate the stillness that protected you. Don't overlook the quiet victories. The moments you wanted to defend yourself but didn't, the temptations you resisted, the calm you chose when chaos invited you to dance. Those were the moments you proved your anointing. Those were the moments heaven took note. You are learning what it truly means to be chosen, to be defended without lifting a finger. To watch the divine step into battles you never even saw forming. To feel the shift without having to orchestrate it. To witness justice unfold without bitterness. You were never meant to beg for understanding, because the divine never explains what it intends to reveal. Chosen ones aren't random. You don't simply wander into people's lives by coincidence, you are assigned. Your presence is a message written in human form, a mirror wrapped in flesh, carrying frequencies that activate, expose, and transform. Every encounter with you is divine strategy. Every conversation is curriculum. You are the lesson they prayed for and the test they didn't expect to take. When you enter a life, you expose what's hidden. Not because you try to, but because you are exposure. The light in you doesn't announce itself, it simply reveals whatever cannot exist beside it. That's why some people feel unsettled when you show up. They can't explain it, but your energy pulls things to the surface. Secrets start slipping. Masks start shaking. Intentions reveal themselves. The same people who smiled before you arrived begin to fidget under your silence. That's the power of divine presence. It doesn't accuse, it reveals. You are the divine test, the mirror they can't escape. They don't see you at first, they see themselves reflected in you. The purity of your energy amplifies what they've been hiding. Your consistency exposes their instability. Your authenticity highlights their performance. Some people mistake that discomfort as intimidation, but it's really confrontation, spiritual confrontation. The light in you challenges the shadows in them. They either rise or they resist, but they cannot remain the same.